Yes, but we're not live yet.
We're live
I
now.
think we are.
We're live.
We
Yeah,
made it.
we made it. We're back
Yeah.
with part two, this exciting conclusion of inflammation and how hyperbarics can help heal that and help you lose weight. So, Dr. Masha, you're on.
Yay. I'm sorry for, I think something, yeah, something that we had no control over. But we're back, and so that's
Mm,
good. To
yes,
give
we
a
made it.
brief, yeah, to give a brief recap, we were talking about hyperbaric oxygen therapy and its benefits. I think I was explaining how it increases the amount of oxygen that's available to cells and tissues. And we need that oxygen for growth, for repair, and to produce energy. And that's what it does. That's why people who have fatigue, they usually benefit from hyperbarics. And inflammation, you've mentioned inflammation. That's a
Hmm.
big one. So whenever there is lack of oxygen, and lack of oxygen can happen for several reasons. There was a physical trauma and there's no blood supply, there's not going to be much oxygen available to that particular part of the body. Maybe we're shallow breathers, or maybe we have apnea. That's a condition, and usually people who snore a lot, they most likely have apnea. So they're not getting enough oxygen. They just stop breathing in the middle of the night and then they start breathing again. Maybe it's the posture. Maybe it's the previous lung infection. So there are many reasons why we could be, and there are also other many diseases. Part of the disease would be that hypoxic state, that lack of oxygen, for various reasons. It's very common. I should say, unless a person really pays attention, they're probably oxygen deprived. So whenever we're oxygen deprived, that creates inflammatory state, the state of inflammation. And I believe that inflammation is the mother of all diseases. That's where disease starts,
Hmm.
when there's inflammation. What is inflammation? Well, if you cut a finger, it becomes red and it starts pulsating and it's really painful. That's what
Hmm.
inflammation feels like. But it's not always when you cut a finger. There could be things happening inside your body that you're not, like, you can't really see, right? Unless you have an MRI machine or something with you.
So, I have
Yeah.
a question. So,
Hmm.
about inflammation, right? Could it be like arthritis where your joints are swollen or parts of your inflamed parts inside of your body?
That's a really good question because you're right on. And I was just going to say it. So you can't see it, but you can feel it. If there's pain, if there's discomfort, if there's lack of movement, um, if there's something that just doesn't feel right, chances are, and I would say 99.9%, it's inflammation. It's the consequence of that inflammation. Really, with COVID, if you look at the whole COVID thing, um, it's not the infection that resulted in death of so many people. It's not the infection itself. It's the actual inflammation that has happened as the result of the infection. That's how bad is the inflammation. Like, we need to bring the inflammation down. Anti-inflammatories, right? Good example. Whenever you're not feeling right, what does your doctor give you? They give you
Hmm.
anti-inflammatories.
Motrin.
So
and in the
yeah, so
military, it was
hyperbarics,
number one.
yeah. So hyperbarics is your best natural anti-inflammatory out there. It just naturally brings the inflammation down. And when we bring the inflammation down, and that's why people who treated COVID with hyperbarics, and there are many studies and there are ongoing studies now with acute COVID and also with long COVID. So they had such a great success. And
Wow.
many countries did these studies, and they could tell that it was a very high success rate, like close to 98% success rate. People who were treated, and it was regardless of the severity of the COVID that they had, because they were able to bring the inflammation down. Hyperbarics is not the only thing that can bring the inflammation down, and we have other tools. For example, diet. What we eat, there are foods that create inflammation, and you know this. Like, you go out and you have this dinner. And then you come home and then like your stomach hurts and you feel like you ate a stone and it's sitting in your stomach and it's not moving anywhere. That's
Like when you're
inflammation.
bloated, when you're feeling
Yeah.
bloated. What about if you eat something, for example, when I eat white table salt, like the girl that's I don't know if you have this in Europe, but over here we have Morton salt, and it's a little girl, she's famous, and she's holding a salt thing and it's spilling out. Okay, this is iodized white table salt. If I eat that, my face swells up, my hands swell up, and I have a lot of fluid retention as well. Is that something like inflammation?
Of course, that's inflammation. Allergies is inflammatory disease. Any disease you take, there's inflammation component and it's
Mhm.
huge. So you need to bring inflammation down. First thing we do always, we look at what person eats. Because with food, we can bring a lot of inflammation down. But when they're severely inflamed, food is not something that's going to give a really quick and drastic relief. It's more of a prevention thing and it will work over time. But if you need something like with COVID, you need to bring the inflammation down now. Yesterday, it had to be down. You put
Mhm.
that person in a hyperbaric chamber. Why they develop inflammation, why they're predisposed to that inflammation, that's another story. Those are lifestyle factors. Stress creates a lot of inflammation. When you over exercise, when you overdo it at the gym, it also creates inflammation. So, a lot of a good thing is not necessarily a good thing either. So, you need to carefully look at that. Lack of sleep. You know this feeling, you've slept 3 or 4 hours, you wake up the next day, and you just feel inflamed. You just like feel that you really just want to
Puffy and
sleep.
gross.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exhausted.
And grumpy.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's how you feel, and that's inflammation. We need to bring inflammation down, and we have a lot of tools. Things like supplements, vitamin D brings inflammation down, especially in people who are deficient. Melatonin is great anti-inflammatory. Turmeric, you probably heard about that one. Turmeric, or also called curcumin, it's a great green tea, is great anti-inflammatory. So we have many tools in the box. Red light therapy is anti-inflammatory. We have many tools. We have, to know how to use them, put them together, and hyperbarics. And hyperbarics is great because in 1 hour you can achieve a lot, and it's non-invasive. It's not something, even an IV therapy that I really enjoy, but that kind of involves a needle going into a vein, and not everybody is
Mhm.
really too keen about that. But go inside a hyperbaric chamber is really easy. And it brings down inflammation, and that brings us to weight loss, because weight
Wait,
loss is an
before
interesting
you
one.
go on to weight loss, Carla, I want to hear about everything we just learned.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's the first time I'm hearing about hyperbaric treatment, and I want to know actually what are the side effects. If there's any side effect of that
I
treatment.
I mentioned claustrophobia because,
Okay.
as you could see, let me show the ones who were not, because we did let me see, how can I, let me move around without, I think maybe that would, this is a hyperbaric chamber, so you get inside, and at first or second treatment you might feel a little claustrophobic. You might not. I've had many patients who just went in and they absolutely had no claustrophobia, but because I have claustrophobia myself, maybe that's kind of, that I always talk about it. But
Mm.
it's absolutely manageable. Absolutely manageable. There are tips to avoid claustrophobia. It is quite spacious inside. Like, I can actually sit up inside the chamber. That's how spacious it is. There's a lot of space. I get in with my daughter, and we take two dogs with us. So there's quite a lot of space.
Okay.
Other side effects could be discomfort in the ears because we're changing the pressure, right? So
Mm.
when you fly on the airplane, some people, when the plane goes up or the plane goes down, they might feel it in their ears. Solution, you need to equalize the pressure. So you either need to yawn or maybe open your mouth or just blow into your nose. not an issue for many people. There are contraindications, which I should talk about. Very few, only one absolute contraindication, and that's a collapsed lung. So if a person has a collapsed lung, they're probably going to go to the hospital. They're not going to be getting into a hyperbaric chamber anyways, but we must say that there is a contraindication. And there are some relative contraindications. For example, sinuses, inflamed sinuses, it would just be uncomfortable. Same with an ear infection, or maybe high fever, or uncontrolled high blood pressure. If a person comes to my clinic and their blood pressure is 180 over, I don't know, 100, I'm not going to put them in a hyperbaric chamber. We're going to work on their blood pressure. Generalized anxiety, just because a person can get anxious, but we'll just spend a little longer talking about it, and generally it's fine. There are a couple of others, but really they're just minor, and your hyperbaric practitioner would always go with you over the checklist to see if you might fall. Maybe a pregnant woman, if she hasn't used a hyperbaric chamber before. Here in Europe, not so much, because they're using hyperbarics for pregnant women. In US, being just a little more cautious with that. Not every hyperbaric practitioner would, want to put a pregnant woman in a hyperbaric chamber, but generally, if there are no, it's even used for pregnancy, for some of the complications of pregnancy.
So, okay, while we're talking about this, I know we're kind of focused on inflammation and weight loss in the hyperbaric chamber as like a little known secret that is really helpful. So, we're trying to put the word out there, obviously, because a lot of people don't know about this, and it's really helpful. So, I guess my question is, what can you just run down a list of things that going into the hyperbaric chamber would be really useful for, just so people get an idea of how much?
Oh, gosh, it's huge.
Mhm, mhm.
You said we're only going to be here for an hour. I don't know if I can finish in an hour. So, okay, it's being used for wellness. And I have a hyperbaric living podcast. So I interview all kinds of people, from doctors to patients to clinic owners. Um, about the cost of the therapy, I will go back to that because you're not the first one to ask that question. So I will
Good
cover the
question,
costs of
Tendai.
therapy. Let me just go over indications first. So it can be used for wellness, for